Hi, Mr. Schneider. Thank you for joining us today.
Of course.
Hello, Mr. Amenabar. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Peterson. So just to go over what the interview is going to be about, we're going through a lot of classical films that came out in the early 2000s, and we're interviewing directors about how the world occurrences that were going on during the film's production shaped the direction of the films and how modern world events stand up to those directions that the film took. So, with regards to your film, Troy, we just wanted to ask, what factors do you think were going on, or what events were going on around the world in 2004 that affected the direction the film took?
So the film came out in 2004. Of course, we had been working on production for a while before that, but the film really focused on the issues that we're experiencing in the Middle East, and of course, issues that we're dealing with today. Specifically, we really want to address a lot of the issue of the Iraq War. We have a lot of parallelisms throughout the film in terms of setting. We have this very dark and deserty setting. We looked a lot at issues with leadership and this idea of tyranny. And really, we kind of tried to get at the question of what is a just war in general.
My film didn't really have any intentions to parallel any of the ongoing events that were happening when it came out. The film was produced in a way that we felt like a comic book almost, because it was taken from a comic book. We try to stay very true to the comic book and even the original source material. But I do think there are possible parallels from back then when the film was produced and now. But the film was not based off of it wasn't trying to insinuate anything or parallel anything that was going on. Some of the key themes we were looking at there is just how religion and zealotry in general has a very high destructive capacity towards anything, and it's especially dangerous towards science, towards objectivity, to history, the recordings of history, to secular culture, and to many other very important things. So I think it was very pertinent in that time in history, the transition to the Dark Age to the Middle Ages, where a lot of classical thought and classical knowledge is really lost for a very long period of time. And so I think it was probably more so then than now, but I do think it is a very pressing issue now. If you take Hypatia, for example, she's a very prominent scholar in her time, but her voice is she's oppressed, and her voice is oppressed because she's a woman and she doesn't subscribe to what people view as the ideal feminine, or what's ideal femininity is, and so she's labeled as a witch and she's executed. And I think that can kind of be applied forward today, and so we're seeing a lot of I don't want to say resurgence, but there's a lot of religious zealotry going on in the Near East and Far and Middle East, and those are suppressing feminine voices, or suppressing minority voices, and just intellectual thought in general. And so I think this kind of serves as a cautionary tale for going forward to our times now, because it's still something that's going on.
When we made this film, we really looked at the idea of Agamemnon and this parallelism between his leadership and this idea of really forcing yourself into a country, and comparing it to Bush. And obviously, the American political system right now, you have a lot of issues with leadership. I'm sure comparisons between Agamemnon and Trump could be made today. And looking at U.S. foreign policy, trying to push into foreign wars, different feelings of entitlement in countries where you really don't have a place, or the rest of the world doesn't really feel like you have a place. I definitely think that this film is still really pertinent today.
Hypatia searched for the truth, very objective person, and she didn't have any sort of agenda, but she was still destroyed by the radical ideals of her time, the very intolerant ideals, or very intolerant parties of her time. And I do think that's relevant to us today. If you look at what's going on right now in the Middle East with ISIS, if you look at what's going on now with what happened a few months ago in that church in South Carolina, these are just massive occurrences of intolerance, usually religiously related, and they destroy lives, and they destroy ISIS destroyed numerous artifacts, many intellectuals, and things like that. So I do think it's very applicable today I wouldn't go as far to say it's as a destructive force on overall society. I think Western society, to a degree, is more protected than it was in those days. But I do think it's a very important cautionary tale that we have. I'm not going to apologize for my film. You know, we took a little bit of artistic license, but it was from a comic book, and even that comic book was based off of Herodotus, and we try to stay true to his first-hand accounts, how he and even the Spartan soldiers in those days would retell those stories about the Persians, and we were trying to tell it through their eyes, and we weren't trying to insinuate that Persian people or Iranian people are monsters or anything like that. I do see why they take it offensively, but at the same time, it's art. It's the current Iranian regime is well known for suppression of art in modern times and dating back to forever, essentially. And like I was saying, these ideals I think are very dangerous to the West, and so I think this kind of just shows why. So I'm not going to apologize for my film. It is what it is. So I wish they didn't take such offense to it, but I do understand it is their heritage. So does that address your question?
Yes, thank you for joining us today, Mr.
Of course. Thank you very much.